Our latest book is now available, called Matthew, A Guide to Genuine Discipleship. It's a biblical commentary on that gospel written by pastor and scholar Dr. Jim Denison. Our hope is not that you learn from this study that you ought to live as Jesus' disciple, or that it would be good if you were to live as Jesus' disciple, or that you should be ashamed if you don't live as Jesus' disciple. Rather, our hope is that you learn to actually live as Jesus' disciple throughout your days, for all of your days. Ask for your copy of Matthew, A Guide to Genuine Discipleship at thedailyarticle.org. That's thedailyarticle.org. Greetings and welcome to the Daily Article Podcast. Today is Friday, March the 15th, 2024. I'm Chris Elkins of the Denison Forum, narrating today's article by Dr. Ryan Denison. While Congress has been trying to find a way to rein in TikTok for more than 3 years, the bill passed by the House of Representatives earlier this week seems to have the best chance yet of limiting China's potential influence through the massively popular social media app. With a vote of 352 to 65, the legislation was sent up to the Senate with overwhelming and bipartisan support. And while it's expected to face a more difficult time there, President Biden has already said that he would sign it if the bill makes it to his desk. So what exactly would the bill do, and why has opposition to the app grown so much in recent years? Let's start with why members of Congress on both sides of the aisle seem so worried about TikTok's pervasive use by Americans. The Chinese Communist Party requires that all Chinese tech companies surrender any data that the government requests, regardless of privacy laws in the countries where it was originally collected. And while there is no clear evidence that the Chinese Communist Party has abused that ability in America to date, a former employee of ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, alleged that the government used the app to identify and monitor activists in Hong Kong during pro-democracy protests of 2018. Many in the American government fear the same capabilities could be used here as well. TikTok currently has an estimated 170 million American users, and as Representative Mike Gallagher, the chair of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party and co-author of the bill, remarked, America's foremost adversary has no business controlling a dominant media platform in the United States. Whether it was a letter to America from Osama bin Laden that went viral on TikTok last year, or the way the app has promoted videos favoring Hamas in the wake of the October 7th attacks last fall, Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, the bill's co-author, and Representative Gallagher note that the platform continued to show dramatic differences in content relative to other social media platforms. And given that it can take users as little as 10 minutes for TikTok to begin recommending shockingly explicit content on subjects like suicide, drugs, and a host of other topics, the threat extends well beyond geopolitical issues. Any lingering doubts as to the app's influence were put to rest when TikTok pushed a notification, one only some users could remove by clicking it, encouraging them to contact their congressional representatives to oppose the bill. In response, members of Congress were quickly inundated with thousands of calls from people expressing a range of response from anger to threats of suicide if the legislation passed. And while companies and government entities have taken steps to ban TikTok to some degree, members of Congress appear on the verge of expanding their censorship of the app on a much broader scale. So what would the bill aim to do? The basic gist of the bill is that ByteDance has 6 months to either sell off its American user base or leave it behind entirely, something the Chinese Communist Party has vowed not to do. However, that's not all it contains. To begin, should ByteDance fail to divest itself of TikTok's American market, the bill is designed to ensure that individual companies will do it for them. After the 6 months is over, any app store or entity found to host TikTok could face civil penalties of up to $5,000 for each user within the land or maritime borders of the United States. While the bill names ByteDance and TikTok specifically, the language is such that it would give the president the authority to designate other foreign adversary-controlled applications as subject to similar censorship. Currently, the list of foreign adversary companies to whom the bill would apply consists of North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran, though that list could be updated at a later time should the American government deem it appropriate to do so. That last bit of open-ended legislation is what has many of the bill's detractors worried. Most see the threat that TikTok poses, but fear that giving the government the authority to impose this level of censorship could set a troubling precedent for the future. In short, they're worried that the solution will end up being worse than the problem. And that's a concern that extends beyond TikTok and the bill opposing it. One of the most difficult aspects of fixing the sin in our lives can be addressing the symptom rather than the root cause of our struggles. We see that idea playing out with the religious leaders throughout the Gospels as Jesus continually worked to tear down the man-made laws intended to keep people from sin, but which ended up keeping them from God. That dynamic was at the heart of his Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5, verses 21 through 48, where 6 times Christ addresses the crowd with some variation of, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." In each case, his goal was to help people understand the ways that they had become so focused on controlling their actions that they had given sin room to take root in their hearts. And as a result, their solution only made the problem worse. Instead, in Matthew 5, verse 48, Jesus calls them to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Eugene Peterson, in The Message, translates it this way. In a word, what I'm saying is, grow up. You're kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously towards others, the way God lives toward you. End quote. Christ's last call hasn't changed. He still expects us to grow up and become the people he has created us to be. And a key part of doing so is learning to see beyond the moment to address the real problem without creating a host of others in the process. Where does God want you to grow up today?
We're grateful for our podcast listeners. If you find the Daily Article podcast helps you better understand today's news and cultural issues and then respond biblically, please rate and review the Daily Article podcast on the platform from which you subscribe. That helps people find and follow the Daily Article podcast.